Hi, everybody. Welcome. We just have folks joining in. Fantastic. Always really great to see people coming in. Warm welcome from not so sunny Oxford, but we can pretend, right? So I know we're dialing in from all over the world, and I'm really delighted to spend this hour with you. Really looking forward to the conversations. And I'll start by introducing myself. So I am Dr. Mary Johnstone-Louis. I am the academic director of an amazing collaboration that we currently have here at Oxford with the business school and our colleagues across the university, including at Oxford Net Zero, which is really a world-leading research center on net zero transition and regulation, and the Smith School for Environment and Enterprise, which is again a world-leading center of looking at what the economy will look like in a energy transition future. So really thrilled to represent this program here and really thrilled to kick off this conversation with all of you. I also want to take a moment to introduce you to Christine. Christine Homaki is one of my longest standing colleagues here at the business school. Really thrilled to introduce her as well. And I know she'll be welcoming you in the chat and sharing a little bit more about her own role. And Christine, would you like to just say a quick hello?
Yes, thank you so much, Mary. And hello, everyone. I can see that people are still joining the chat. So I will be here supporting Mary on the program, and it's really lovely to see you coming from all over the globe. I will be sharing a bit more information about the work that I'm doing with Mary. So please stay tuned all the way to the last minute. And there's some exciting things that we'd like to share.
Great. Thanks so much, Christine. Great to
You're
have you
welcome.
here. Fantastic. And so Christine will go off camera now, but she'll be very much with us. And so please do use the chat. So the first thing I want to do is make this as interactive as possible. So I'd love you in the chat to introduce yourself. Just say your name. If you'd like to, you can say your sector if that's of interest to you to share. And please do tell us where you're dialing in from, because it's really, really interesting for us to think about where the questions are coming from geographically and where people are coming in from the globe. So really, really looking forward to hearing where everyone's dialing in. So please go ahead and put your name and where you're dialing in from in the chat. It'd be great to see that. Thanks so much. And Christine will begin to share a bit more information as we go as well, so you can peruse at your leisure. Great. Jenny, thanks for kicking us off from Newbury. Excellent. Wonderful. Sarah from Switzerland. Asim, we know Asim. Asim is one of our alums. Asim, great to see you. Chris, exactly. We have some great colleagues dialing in as well, including from our Leading Sustainable Corporations program. So this is fantastic. We've got a great crowd in the chat. Now, I would encourage you to use the chat as we go. I will go ahead and give remarks, but I would love the chat to be a live space. So I can't promise I can multitask with it at the moment as I'm going, but what I would love to do is as I'm speaking, use it as a place to, of course, dialogue with each other, and then also use it as a place to put in questions as we go. So I would love to, by the kind of last 20 minutes of this time together at minimum, really pull into the chat and begin to engage with the questions that have come in. And so please do introduce yourself and put your questions in the chat as we go as well. So fantastic. So sustainability in 2025, key steps to ensure your company is ready to lead. It is such a topical moment to begin to think about what does it mean to really deliver sustainability in 2025 in a time of such global shifts, such uncertainty, such volatility. I know that we're having folks calling in from everywhere from Canada to Nigeria to India to the countries across the Middle East, and what a volatile time we are living in. And what I'll try and convince you of today is that sustainability is alive and well and requires leadership more than ever. So we can debate that in the chat. So really looking forward to this time together. A little bit about me, for those of you I haven't had the chance to meet in person, I spend most of my time as a researcher really thinking about the role of large corporations in society. So a few things that just by way of resources and also for you to understand a little bit about my work. I wrote the introduction to the Harvard Business Review Guide to ESG. Now, this was in 2024. And so already at that point, there were some murmurs around what does ESG really mean, right? Are we understanding in a clear enough way how it isn't just a trend and actually does it drive value. And actually, you'll see if you have the chance to take a look at the chapter I wrote, is I actually shared some caution around the language of ESG in the sense that ESG can be a very, very powerful tool for capital markets and certain types of understanding asset allocation. But actually, in many ways, ESG has often had far too much distance from core strategy for many businesses to really make use of it. And so I would be welcome to debate that and welcome to discuss. But I think as I introduce to you the way that I think about sustainability in my research, I hope that it will begin to make sense why I make that claim. I also spend a lot of time with multi-generational, large global family businesses. So I know depending on where you are calling in from the world, I see folks from Pakistan, from Guatemala, and family business remains the world's most common organizational form in terms of economic arrangements, right? And so we don't talk about family business enough, but actually this is a report that I wrote with about 20 of mostly European leading family businesses on thinking about how their multi-generational perspective actually enables them to have some really special leverage when it comes to climate. And then finally, my co-author and I, Richard Barker, have the book coming out on from the Financial Times. We're really proud of this work, and I hope that what I can do in this webinar is give you a 360 kind of view and also a 30,000-foot view. It's just what we have to say in that book about what sustainability is and why it matters for businesses. So let's dive in. Let's jump on in. So we hear a lot about sustainability rollbacks in 2025. I can't count, I think not a day has gone by of this calendar year so far where I haven't seen a headline or had a student speak to me or a leader that I'm engaging with and ask, is sustainability still alive? Are we still really thinking that way? Are companies still bought in, right? So we have these headlines around abandoning green targets, around rolling back from net zero commitments. And this is really the context in which we are living, right? And so, what I would like to say is that actually what it means is it's time to move from a more compliance and perhaps sometimes performative view of sustainability to an approach to sustainability that really sits it at the core of value creation for the business. And we do see some businesses, including a bank that I know quite well here in Europe, Triodos, who are starting to make the case from an economic point of view that actually these kinds of backlash don't make sense. And we can debate that together. And I'd be curious to know from the regions that you are based here in the world, I'd be curious to know in the chat if you're seeing that backlash and what you're experiencing at the moment. So please do make a few comments in the chat if you'd like to, and just share with me what you're seeing from your part of the world in terms of rollbacks and pushback on the sustainability agenda. But what I want to say, I will just share with you. I have a column on Forbes.com, which is hopefully quite accessible. And what I've done there very strongly in the last several months is really try to highlight and spotlight ways that companies can continue to think about their leadership and where their future of their business is headed, right? So this is an article that I put out just this month, actually, unlocking sustainability with 3 simple questions. And I thought this would be a useful way for us to come into this webinar today and for you to really be able to walk away with some takeaways that you can bring into your own business. So this is what we'll really be working on together and looking forward to bringing those questions into conversation in the chat. So here's the 3 questions, right? And I'll break down what these questions mean, all right? So when we think about sustainability, we often tend to think about it in this very one-way kind of perspective, right? So we often tend to think about sustainability often as the negative impact that business has on particularly the environment. But I want to say that's only one element, right? And so what this is really about is 3 questions that enable you to go into your business and to think about, yes, of course, what is the sustainability impact of your business? That is a starting point, right? How well do you understand the impact that you have on the environment, the impact that you have on social impact in your remit, but that's not where it stops, right? So the other 2 key pieces that I think are even more exciting for businesses and even more strategically important are the second question, which is what is the impact, particularly of sustainability risk, but sometimes opportunity on your business? right? And we'll go into some examples of what that means and how we're seeing companies, we're seeing board members and executives begin to think about sustainability from that perspective as well. And then finally, the third question that I really find the most exciting to engage with businesses on is which innovation opportunities does sustainability offer for your business? And that's where I really feel like we will see the difference between those who are really leading and those who are sometimes caught up in the headlines and finding it really challenging to find their way forward. The businesses I know who are really leading in this area are looking at that third question. They're looking at it from an innovation frame and they're thinking about their core value creation and how they will be leading the industries of not just today, but of tomorrow. So let's break down these questions a little bit more. And I'd again be really interested to see in the chat, what does sustainability mean to you, right? These are fundamentally the two questions we need to clarify when we're talking about this word. What does it mean to you as a leader, right? You and your team and the way that you think about it in terms of your ambitions and your metrics and even the way that you approach what sustainability means. And then sometimes it's a little bit different. What does it mean for our organization? And I've spoken with many leaders who are not clear about what it means for their organization. And I would say that's a really, really powerful opportunity for you to step in and with your teams to actually show what that can mean. So I'll share with you a definition that my co-author and I, Richard Barker, who have our book, The Financial Times Guide to Leading Sustainable Business, coming out in this next couple of months. And for us, a sustainable business is one that strengthens natural and social systems as it creates profitable products and services. So businesses are not charities, right? There is a need to create profit. There is a need to create financial value. And what's really key and really, I think, opens up a lot of space to really think and to create from this definition is that actually when you imagine the social and environmental systems on which business depends and on which it impacts, you begin to understand your value creation in very different ways, right? And what I would say is that very few businesses, if any, are fully here, right? And so sometimes we talk about businesses that are trying to move from sustainable to something like circular or sustainable to something like regenerative, right? Something that really goes beyond the status quo. And I think that kind of thinking fits really well with this definition because what this definition is really inviting companies to do is to think very carefully and very creatively about your value creation proposition and think about what are the social and the environmental systems. So everything from biodiversity to water to soil to the carbon systems, right? And so trying to think about what are the resources on which you depend. And then, of course, what are the impacts, right? And for many companies, one of your most important social impacts is, of course, in job creation, in training, in giving opportunities, in enabling people to fulfill their skills and their potential to the fullest, right? And so it's a really more holistic view that enables companies to think about what are our dependencies and what are our impacts, right? So really looking forward to hearing what people think and how this definition lands. And where I think this way of thinking takes us is really the idea that sustainability is the biggest innovation challenge of our time. So that's my contention. And I would love to see the way that you're bringing that to life and that your teams are bringing that to life in your organizations. In our Oxford Sustainable Business Program, which Christine will share with you about at the end, this is a core feature of the way that we think about what it means to deliver sustainability in your organization. And the reason that's true is because we are really at a cusp point at the moment where businesses who will be leading in their industries in the next 5, 10, even 20 years are businesses that right now are doing the innovation in materials, in processes, in product, and really thinking about how do I create value in a way that actually benefits and doesn't introduce the kind of social and environmental risks that so many businesses have seen themselves become mired in until now. And so this is really an incredible innovation opportunity and one that we're really, really looking forward to seeing more and more leaders embrace and support and really take forward. So let's break this down a little bit more. So the three questions that I shared with you from the Forbes.com article, which is free to read, very happy, I'll pop it in the chat if that's possible at the end, is really this question of looking at rather than just one lens on sustainability, looking at it through three different lenses. So the impact of your business on the external world, the impact of the external world on your business, right? And then the opportunities for your business. And I'll go through these in a little bit more detail. So let's start with the first. So healthcare is an industry that I've spent some time working with recently. And so I wanted to share these examples from the healthcare industry. And I think this is something that is a really useful example because it's something that we all agree is important, right? So healthcare in a lot of ways is not discretionary, right? It's something that we know we need to deliver. We know we need to do it well. We need to be prioritizing our patients, and whether that's in a private or a public system, right? The fact is that the delivery mechanisms for healthcare, interestingly enough, often have a very significant environmental impact. So let's talk a little bit about the environmental impacts of healthcare. And if any of you are in the healthcare industry, feel free to shout and let me know in the chat if this is something that's resonating with you. So, first of all, interesting to note that healthcare related emissions can lead to air pollution and, of course, therefore health risks, right? And so, if we think about even something like anesthetic gas, which is used in surgery, has a high emissions rate. And so, actually, the emissions burden from the delivery of the anesthetic gases is something that is non-trivial for the healthcare industry. Similarly, water pollution, right, is depending on the kinds of supportive infrastructure in which your company is existing. Healthcare related waste can contaminate water sources and is a huge source of challenges and actually threat on the very systems on which we depend. And then, of course, resource consumption. Healthcare, of course, uses natural resources, as do all of our businesses in all of the ways that we engage them, but particularly because of the single-use items, for example, syringes or single-use delivery. Medical devices, because of the need for a sterile environment, which must be maintained, the single use is a real challenge. And so, from the air pollution to the water to the resource consumption, these are environmental impacts of delivering good healthcare. And so, the challenge is if you are in the healthcare sector, how do you think about this? And is there a way that you can begin to understand these impacts in a way that actually helps you to think about what are the innovation opportunities here? All right. So that's of the impact of. And the second one is the impacts on, right? So at the same time as healthcare is, as an industry is creating these external impacts, there are, of course, any number of sustainability related external impacts that impinge on a healthcare industry's ability to deliver care. So, as we know, changes in weather, changes in rising global emissions, lower air quality, all of these have significant health impact and actually increase the burden on healthcare systems and on healthcare providers. Similarly, with water pollution remains one of the most lethal and inimical parts of health at the moment, in the sense that people are exposed to waterborne diseases. People are exposed or lack the kind of regular and affordable access to clean water, which is linked to many, many different health risks. And then, of course, overconsumption of natural resources, including key inputs, key ingredients, natural inputs to healthcare products, can lead to unpredictable costs and the need to adapt, the need to source alternative ingredients, the need to even generate perhaps synthetic versions. And so it's a very interesting lens in the sense that we often think about sustainability in terms of the company's impact on the external. But when we think about the impacts on healthcare or on any given industry of sustainability, they are really quite substantial and they can really help you direct strategy towards what we love to think about is this final third question, which is really environmental opportunities for healthcare, right? So this goes for any industry, and I'd invite you to use these three lenses, the of, on, for, in your own business and really begin to test and think about what is something new that I can learn by using one of these three lenses. So for healthcare, the opportunities are really endless, right? In terms of thinking about the need to collaborate with partners, to collaborate with governments, to really think about new delivery methods, the ways to think about how do we scale efficient processes for water treatment and actually ensuring that we're not using as much water as we possibly were in the past. And then thinking about how scarcity can actually lead to innovative and sometimes completely new value propositions. So we're seeing this even in the delivery of anesthetic gas, which I mentioned earlier. Completely new methods, completely new technologies, many of which are now, of course, driven by tech and driven by the new kind of digital tools that we have at our disposal. And it really is an exciting time. And I would say this transition is mirrored at the innovation level in industries all across the world, from building to transport to textiles and fashion to agriculture and food. And it's just about coming to it with the right kind of mindset and the right kind of questions that enables you to see sustainability as an opportunity and also as a risk to be managed, right? And so I think that's where we really want to help you land today. So when we think, first of all, about what does sustainability mean for you, that's a question for you as a leader. And then it's also a question around your organization. And so what I want to do now is just have you think a little bit about what does sustainability mean for your organization, right? And many of us will work in organizations that have some kind of a purpose or a mission or a sustainability claim. And it might even be in your internal or your external or your annual reports. But I'm asking the question in a slightly different way. So when I say, what does sustainability mean to your organization? What I'm really asking you is, how can you tell, right? How can you really tell that sustainability is core and is actually a really key consideration when it comes to your company's evaluation of opportunities, risks, and innovation? And I think that's where we get into some real leadership challenge and opportunity that we've seen again and again with, for example, the participants on the program that we lead both online and in person. So how can you tell? What are some things that you might want to think about? So as you're going back into your organizations after this webinar, what I would love you to be equipped with is these specific questions that will help you to use these lenses in real time, right? So when it comes to the impact of sustainability in your organization, so your impact on the external world, what insight do you have, right? How well do you understand your organization's impact on the external world? And might be that there's insights that you're missing. And then a key question, which is so often missed, is who uses these insights? If you have data on your impact, the impact of your organization on the external world, on the society, and on the environment, who within the organization is using these? Are they used for reporting or are they used for decision making? And if so, where? Where are they showing up in decision making? So this is a really key question, right? The second one is around the question that actually it's very easy to overlook, but what is the impact on our organization of sustainability? And this is a really key point in the sense that one thing you might want to ask is who is asking for this information, right? Are our board members asking for what are some of the sustainability impacts on our organization? What are some of the risks that we face due to, for example, changing weather events or changing I see there's a comment on the insurance industry. Interesting. Yeah. So insurance is an excellent example of this, right? So insurance has seen huge disruption, and it's particularly in this second question, this question of the impact on their ability to price, their ability to price risk, their ability to actually respond to extreme weather events. And it's resulted in whole areas of coastal areas in particular, and then whole areas that are fire prone actually becoming uninsurable, which has massive impact on real estate values in those areas. So when you think about that second question of the impact of sustainability on your organization, it's really about, again, who's asking for that information, who should be, and then who uses those insights and how do they use them, right? So that's what you really want to be tracking. And then finally, when you think about the sustainability innovation opportunities, the opportunities for, it's a question for you to begin to get a sense of how well do these insights engage your key stakeholders, right? Ideally, you would want them to be engaging your board. You would want your exec leadership team, your senior leadership team, your investors to be interested in opportunities for innovation. You'd also want people who are close to the ground in operations, who are often the source of insight and the source of knowledge, to be alert to what are some of the risks, what are some of the opportunities, And how are you creating channels for them to voice ideas in terms of what can this mean for opportunities for innovation for your organization? So I hope that's useful in terms of thinking about questions you might use when you go back into your organizations and begin to assess this question of what does sustainability really mean, right? So what these questions are helping you to do is answer that question in your own mind around how can you tell, right? And what do you need to put in place for your teams so that your teams will be able to tell, right? So what we know, and this is from the IBM Business Value Survey last year, is we know that there are many ways that companies do approach sustainability, and they broadly fall into three categories. Now, these are crude, these are imperfect, but I share them with you simply because I think it's a very helpful build as you think about what you will go into your organization and do, right? So the most typical one is really on a compliance focus, right? This idea that actually it's the external environment, regulation, reporting requirements that actually cause us to have, as a company, sometimes what can be quite a reactive and compliance focused emphasis on sustainability. Now, regulation and reporting are, of course, essential, right? And this will be a key part of probably most of what your sustainability team is tasked to do. And there is no shortage of confusion at the moment due to the very rollbacks and pushbacks that we were talking about earlier in this conversation, from the US to the EU. Reporting regimes, regulatory regimes have been in flux in 2025. What I would say is that actually, while compliance focus is an important piece of the puzzle, it's not clearly tied to creating new business value, right? And so a second approach to sustainability, which is also quite common, is really taking it more as a project. So this might be something that sits within one department. It might have something that's a very specific kind of committee. It might even have really senior level representatives on that committee. But fundamentally, there is a gap between that project focus and the core value creation of the company, right? So it's something, the good way to test it is, could this be cut, right? In times of economic duress, right? And so I think that's a really, really good test. It's a very hard test, right? And we know that many companies are really struggling at the moment, and that actually many, many sustainability projects are being cut as we speak, including incredibly important ones. But what I would say is, to the extent that you can, if you're in that situation, keep on, right? Because the next stage is really making that case for sustainability not to be seen as a compliance tool, not to be seen as a project, but to be seen as something that's truly embedded. And when I say embedded, I of course am referring to reporting requirements, internal and external, governance framework, so ensuring that there's a group-wide and a firm-wide perspective on these issues. But what I think is the real magic is really understanding that actually you will have the ability to create and generate new value and become an industry leader in new areas because of the way that you are thinking about sustainability in an embedded manner. And I believe that actually the first three questions that I shared at the beginning of this presentation, so what is the impact of our organization? What are the impacts on our organization? And what are the opportunities for our organization? Really can go a long way in terms of helping the organization to build that muscle of embedding sustainability. So what I want you to think about this is not an either or, because I know that many of the businesses on this call will be in different starting places, and that's not always within your control. In fact, it rarely is. But what I want you to do is think about a way of communicating about your own company's approach to sustainability really as a trajectory, right? And it might be one in which you start from a compliance focus, you move to a project focus, but keeping that idea that actually where you really want to get is to have it really be embedded so that you will be firmly focused on the ways that these social and environmental impacts and dependencies lead to increases in generating value and in even creating new innovation opportunities. And so when we think about how do we test ourselves, and again, I saw the question in the chat. You'll all have access to a recording of this webinar prior or following the end of the webinar, so you will have access to these questions as well. So how do you know where you are in terms of the compliance focus, the project focus, or whether sustainability is really embedded? So here's a few questions that I found useful to think about in terms of how you might diagnose where your company is, right? So first of all, why do we tend to approach sustainability in a compliance-based manner, right? Depending on the industry you're in, that might be very, very much part of how you think about the industry. What are the risks of this approach, right? And what opportunities could you begin to point your organization towards in order to unlock further value, right? And then with the project focus, it's really about doing a little bit of detective work and thinking, how did the interest in this project start, right? There might have been a seed, and we've seen this with so many of our alumni from both the Oxford Leading Sustainable Corporations program and the Oxford in-person Sustainable Business program. We have seen this in the sense that actually you need to find those internal champions and then essentially think about what opportunities can be unlocked if their remit, if their resourcing, if their ability to really speak to those who are in more senior roles is enabled, right? And this is where you begin to think about, have we gotten to an embedded approach? And again, that's not a place to rest on your laurels, right? So we need to think about, how secure is our approach? And does it depend on a particular leader? This is incredibly common, that actually you want to really think about, does this rely on someone who has a very strong conviction themselves? These people are gold dust, they're incredibly valuable, but it's really important to pull back and make sure that the business as a whole, and not just a single leader, has a holistic view of what are the impacts, what are the dependencies, and then what are the opportunities. Because when that leader moves on, as inevitably is likely to happen, the key kind of pillars of focus and of value creation within the organization are what is going to keep the conversation going, and it's what's going to keep momentum, right? And I think for those who are really far beyond, how are we influencing industry in our area, right? So I think that's a really exciting proposition for companies who are really taking an embedded view, and because of that are able to create new value, and they're able to point the way to the way that their industry will look in 3, 5, 10 years and beyond, right? So they really are in a position to become industry leaders. So I'll close just with one more article, which again, you'll have access to in the recording of the slides. So this is another piece I put together on Forbes.com. It's 4 questions that I believe leaders need to ask in order to navigate sustainability right now. So if you've gotten to the stage where you've walked through and you feel pretty comfortable with the kind of first 3 questions that I put to you, so impact of, impact on, and opportunities for, here's 4 more questions that you can take into your boardrooms, into your meetings, and into your teams to begin to think, how are we moving this beyond, in particular, a single leader? And how are we really embedding it in the organization? So here's the questions. It's really the first one is really, can my leadership team and board identify our company's top 3 sustainability risks and opportunities? Right? This is a really powerful question that so rarely gets asked in that explicit way, and that tells you a lot. And then clearly, the next one will be, which sustainability risks and opportunities do we track, right? So how well do we know about our impact of and the impact on, and where do we need more information or data, right? Do we have a clear process to reflect these risks and opportunities in our strategy and our decision making? And then finally, what mechanisms do we have in place to govern sustainability related opportunities and risks over time? Because the big challenge is that sustainability is multi-temporal, multi-generational, and companies, unfortunately, have very few and very weak long-term commitment mechanisms. So this is really one to think about, and really one to begin to discuss and think about, how will we ensure that we deliver on this commitment over time, right? So I really encourage you to take a look at that article and take it into your teams and your boards and into your meetings if that's useful. So I leave with this. I want to leave about 10 minutes for questions. I think we're just on time to be able to do that. So feel free. I'll start working through the chat bit by bit. But I want to leave you with this, that sustainability is the biggest innovation challenge of our time. And so I really see it as an opportunity. And that's exactly why we have put together what we think is really an amazing program here in Oxford. So I'm going to Christine, if that's okay. I will pass over to you just so you can share a little bit about the program. And at the same time, I will be working through the chat and then we'll come back together in just about 5 or 7 minutes, if that's okay. Christine, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm really excited to be working with Mary and the rest of our team on this program. This is our newest program on sustainability that we are actually delivering online. So you get a chance to spend a week with us, 5 days in September. If you would like to know more about these insights that Mary has shared and actually deliver or curate an action plan that you can implement in your organization. So you might have already had training in sustainability, or you're probably thinking of joining as well a different program from another school. I'll just talk a little bit about what makes our program unique. And I think you'd be really excited to hear that this program, as you can see on the logos above, we are not just presenting you this program from the business school. It's actually 3 powerhouse institutions who are working together to deliver this groundbreaking program to you. So Said Business School is ranked the #1 school in responsible business by Financial Times. And the Smith School is delivering all their expertise about climate change. So they bring in the science. And net zero, of course, is the world leading research body for how to get to net zero. So bringing you the tools and also the practical insight. So all these institutions coming together is delivering what we have as our pillars for the program, which is bringing strategy and innovation, the science, and also the regulatory aspect for the program. So all of this will really allow you to move your company forward and use sustainability, not just as a compliance tool, but also an opportunity to really take advantage of this opportunity, the biggest opportunity of our time. So I will also share some information on the chat about how to apply. You can, in the meantime, scan the QR code as well. And also, you can book a call with me if you would like to join the program, thinking of joining, or even just wanting to know more about the program. So I'll see you in the chat, and I will leave it back to Mary to close and wrap up. Okay.
Great. Thanks so much, Christine. That's brilliant. Fantastic. All right. So I see there's some good stuff coming in through the chat. This is fantastic. Let me speak to this question that has come in from, let's see, how would you, so this is from Zara. How would you suggest starting to identify risks and opportunities? Yeah. So this is actually a really key question. And so I'm going to start there if that's okay. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring us back to, all right. So I think that the reason I start with the of, on, for framework, I'm just going to bring us back to this, is really because I understand that many organizations probably don't actually have the information that they need to understand their impacts of, the impacts on them, and let alone the opportunities for them. And so Zara, thank you for the question. I think it's a really, really important one. Where I would start is it's always key to start where you want to end up, right? So where you want to start is thinking about a mapping of really, in terms of the product or the service that you provide, what are the key nature and environmental inputs that you require in order to do that, right? That might be energy, it might be fossil fuel energy, it might be water. In the case of mining processes, it might be looking at, if you're in a more kind of manufacturing firm, it might be looking at metals, right? So these are all things that are part of our daily life and that we often don't think of as an impact or as a dependency as such. But begin to think about where your business creates value, and then think about what are the natural inputs on which your business depends in order to do that. The next piece is, of course, to think about a really key aspect of environmental impact, which is, of course, emissions. So this is probably the easiest place to start if you haven't got a handle on beginning to think about risks and opportunities, is really to begin to track and really to think about and understand what your carbon emissions and your greenhouse gas emissions actually are, and to begin to have a clear understanding of that. And then on the social side, really thinking about what are the social systems, if you will, the human capital, the social inputs on which you rely in order to do your business. Now, for many companies, particularly if you're in a heavier industry like mining or construction, housing, right, real estate, the key piece is a license to operate, right? And so your relationship with your communities and the communities who are affected by your work is really a fundamental input on which you rely. And so really thinking about what's your core value creation and starting to map the three buckets of sustainability. So, one being social, one being carbon and emissions, and one being nature, right? So everything to do with biodiversity and soil and water, natural inputs. Those three buckets are really the place to start. So I hope that's useful, Zara. And I'll go back into the chat. I'm used to being able to do this in a real-time conversation. It's not quite the same. But very, very happy to. Marguerite, I see your question on the EU CSRD. Fantastic. Really, really great question. And I believe that, Marguerite, you are also the one to share about Diageo's Spirit of Progress. Yes, so that's something that we've worked very closely with, and congratulations. It's a really important set of goals. And so, yeah, appreciate your comments, Marguerite. So the challenge that we have at the moment with sustainability reporting requirements is that there has been some moving of the goalposts, right? So you have the International Sustainability Standards Board, the ISSB, which has a set of standards that are much more constrained at the moment, but that are global in nature. And then you have a set of standards that were really slated to come out this year that came from the EU, and that's the point to which Marguerite is referring. And there has been some shift in terms of the way that those will be rolled out, both in terms of timing and in terms of content. Now, the question of, is this aligning to something that really is closer to what global markets have the ability to deliver on, right? And the ability to actually integrate into their operations? That would be one point of view, is that actually the requirements that were being placed on companies were too stringent. It was too much too quickly, right? So that'd be one point of view. The other point of view is that it's been watered down, and that actually companies are now being asked to do less, right? And that a fewer number of companies will actually be held to account under these requirements. So it really is a controversial topic. It brings much debate. And what I wanted to say is, I think fundamentally, what we see is that companies who were chasing that as a kind of driver for behavior, I understand it's an important driver. I understand that the regulation will drive behavior. But companies who were doing so in the absence of really thinking about how did this link to value creation, I fear will probably have put a lot of resources forward towards something that maybe won't give them quite the returns that they would have hoped. So I think what's the biggest challenge with the shift is that actually there has been uncertainty and there has been rollback, if you will. And the challenge is that makes it incredibly difficult for business to plan. So my sense is that this is all the more reason why it's important to be setting your own strategic pace on the sustainability front rather than letting that be set by the regulator. So happy to talk about that more, Marguerite. I see a couple more comments in the chat. So let's see if we've got time for maybe one more before we close out. Let's see. Family offices. Great. Okay, I see a question coming in from Sumit on family offices. For a family office who might be involved in owning equity in multiple businesses and corporations, where would Mary suggest our largest challenges are in sustainability in the future? Right. That's really, yeah. I think this is a really interesting question, given that many of the largest family businesses in the world are conglomerates, and many family offices, of course, naturally have their ownership and equity across sectors, right? And so, in a sense, I would say that actually what you want to think about is spread, right? Which won't be new to you, Sumit. That's something you think about all the time in terms of thinking about where you allocate your assets. But I would think really carefully about the role of tech, the role of technology, and how that fits into the investments that you're also making in what we could call the real economy, right? The kind of manufacturing economy. And so, technology will drive much of the sustainability insights, the data, our understanding. Companies will no longer be in a situation where they can only self-report. There will be, through web scrape technology and all kinds of other tools, AI-enabled tools, there will be ways to get data, and there now currently are ways to get data that's beyond what you could have in the past. The issue is that AI, of course, also has a downside in terms of emissions, so you want to be thinking about that. And then particularly, I think what's really powerful for family offices is you can think in the long term in a way that often listed companies and listed investors can't. So I would encourage you to use that and to leverage that. And I always really encourage business owning families and family office investors to think about themselves as that catalyst that can really be investing in the long-term solutions because they have the time horizon to do that. So I think this might be all we've got time for, but it's been just a taster. I mean, this is exactly what we do for five whole days here in Oxford in September. So I'd love it to see some of you in person, not just in the chat. And please do. I don't know, Christine, did you want to share anything about the event you have coming up on the 12th of June?
Yes, thank you, Mary. Yes, so I have dropped a link in the chat. We do have a an event on the 12th. It's a Zoom meeting, very interactive meeting, and it's called Application to Impact. So for those of you who are probably thinking about whether this program is right for you, how it could benefit your organization or your own role, and just want more information about the program um, and also understand how this program could help you in the organization, we have the session exactly for that. And that's next week coming up really soon, the 12th of June. And we would like to see some of you there. So that session will feature myself and my colleague Daniil, and we are going to just talk through all the information about the program, talk you through the curriculum, who's involved, how it's going to work day to day, and just talk you through the timetable. And also, if you are thinking of applying, we would be giving you tips on how to submit an effective application form. And we'll be there to answer as many questions as we can about your participation. So if you're unsure if this program is for you, then definitely sign up for that session. We hope to see some of you there.
Thanks so much, Christine. I'll let you just pop the
Over
link
to
in
you.
the chat just one more time, if that's okay.
Yeah,
But let me stop
sure.
here. And it's great to see everybody. So hopefully see you in person or see you on our next webinar. And thanks so much for joining, and thanks for the great questions. Much appreciated.